Welcome to SF Commercial Property Conversations with Bruce Bean, where Bay Area investments meet expert insights. Get ready to unlock the strategies of commercial real estate success.
So today we have Matt Ticknor with us, and Matt, you have gone through a very interesting evolution coming today to knob and tube replacement for insurance purposes on buildings that need to upgrade their electrical. So Matt, it's great to have you. I'd love to know how exactly you got from the beginning to knob and tube. You started out on the East Coast.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Great to be here on the podcast. My real estate evolution or story starts in New York, where I'm from where in terms of institutional real estate, started with a company at the time called Real Estate Capital Partners, which was an LP where we joint ventured with operators and developers in the US to develop and build multifamily communities. So that's where I was an analyst for most of the time there. And then after a number of years, moved on to Greystar to join their West Coast development group that was started in 2011 and joined them in 2011 to launch that initiative, and wanted to get under the hood of the car to really see how development happens. And so I was there and was probably involved in 20 something different closings and number of projects between Seattle, Bay Area, and Southern California and Phoenix. And then for me, it was time to do development on my own. And I started a company with my co-founder, Charlie Long, a company called Junction Properties. And that was 2014. And we ended up developing three properties. Two of them we completed and built and completed and leased up just a month before COVID. Finished those projects, full leased up in January of 2020. But started the projects in terms of getting land control in 2015. And so it took 2 years to entitle, and construction was 2 years, and then lease up ended up being 6 months. It was about 175 apartments between those two projects, and it was still like Oakland's still hot, let's go. And in 2019, we got land control for another property and developed and entitled 225 units, and ended up selling that entitlement to another developer in 2022. And so we still operate our two buildings. One's called the Moran and one's called Telegraph Arts, both in downtown Oakland, and just trying to keep the ship steady in this choppy local economic market in Oakland. But at that time, it's to say now it's 2025 now, really had very little visibility. 2022, 23, 24, and there was no development deal that penciled. And my wife came home one day. She's a realtor with Compass, and she was telling me about a number of transactions in 1 week in March of 2024 that were going sideways because the buyers were in escrow with insurance quotes in hand, and the insurance carrier was still underwriting the deal, even though they had already issued a quote. And they discovered knob and tube wiring in those properties and withdrew the quotes while they were in escrow. And this was like, it was 1 week. There were two deals in escrow with buyers holding the insurance quote. And then there was a listing in the Sunset in San Francisco that was a turnkey property, beautiful, and should have had several offers. And none of the buyers were able to get insurance because the house had knob and tube wiring. Keep in mind, there are 200, there were knob and tube wire. Let's see, there was knob and tube wiring was used in San Francisco in the construction of just about every residential single family home and multifamily property up until 1960. Um,
Oh,
in,
really? Oh, wow.
in
I
other
didn't
parts of
realize
the
it was that
country, it
late.
was, yeah, it was, I live in a house built in 1955 and it had knob and tube wiring when I moved in and I replaced it. But yeah, generally every house that we've inspected in the city built before 1960 was built with knob and tube wiring. And there's about 200,000 homes and multifamily units in San Francisco alone that were built with knob and tube wiring. And then the entire, say, Northern California market, is the same thing. So
Yeah.
we tend to focus in San Francisco, but we're getting a lot more calls lately from the East Bay and
Uh,
North Bay and then South Bay,
I
as
do.
far as down to like Menlo Park. And so, after, all these, insurance quotes were withdrawn, I started calling a few insurance companies to understand the problem.
Mm,
And the real issue is the state of California and the insurance policies of the state.
yeah.
And so in the late 80s, Proposition 103 was passed, which required every insurance carrier that wanted to increase their rates greater than 7% to get approval from the insurance commissioner. And it's been, fine for the decades past that. But once wildfire started increasing and, significant losses were realized in the state, um, carriers needed to raise their rates to cover the risks that were growing quickly. And so they were capped at 7%. And so, the insurance market here is not a free market, pricing model. You have to get approval. And if you can't get approval, then you either have to, reduce the number of risks you're willing to cover in a traditional home insurance policy or just leave the state. And so several carriers have left the state because they don't have pricing control on their policies. And so there's a real insurance, called crisis, is what you read in the newspapers here. But essentially, there is no insurance available today on a property that has knob and tube.
Wow.
Buyer has to
Really?
be committed to replacing it. Sellers really need to, include uh, the knob and tube replacement prior to staging the property and putting it onto market. Otherwise, the buyer has to take on that requirement.
Mm,
And imagine, we do it all the time, but you buy a house for the first time, and then you're suddenly required to, gut it. Not I'm gonna say gut it, but we're essentially turning the house into Swiss cheese. And we have a process on how we do these jobs really efficiently, but we take a 4-inch hole saw and we drill to replace all the knob and tube and rewire the house with Romex. And there could be anywhere from like 75 to 150 4-inch circles or more, depending on the size of the house. And then we pass rough-in inspection, and then we patch, float, and paint the walls. Reinstall the fixtures, switches and outlets, and pass final inspection and close out the permit. But if you go on like my Instagram, you'll see videos of the job sites we do where, we're just turning walls into Swiss cheese. And that is the reality in California right now. If you're buying a house that was built with knob and tube wiring, there might have been a renovation in the bathroom or the kitchen, but inside the walls, if you took off the lath and plaster or the sheetrock,
right.
you'll find all the knob and tube wiring in there. And so, 80% of our work is related to a transaction for a buyer or a seller. Um,
Mm,
but we have to inspect the property and we have to identify, how we're going to rewire this house. And then it's a, primarily it's a two trade job, with the electrician and the painter, but we have teams that work together and complete these jobs. Um, Knob and tube is definitely in the early innings. It's not gonna go away unless there is significant reform in the insurance industry. Um, Another aspect of our business is just insurability in general. And we're getting a number of phone calls lately to replace electrical subpanels in both in single family and multifamily properties
Right.
because there's four types of subpanels that are not approved by insurance companies.
God.
And I think the four brands are Zinsco, Federal Pacific, Stablock, um, Challenger, and we just received a termination notice from a homeowner that just signed a new insurance policy, and the property was inspected about 2 weeks after they closed the policy, and they get a termination letter,
Oh,
and it says, due to the Murray breakers. And
mm,
so Murray is now another brand that's added to the list of non-insurable, circuit breakers. And so the kind of like I would say the list of, brands that have any history of not performing are just being added to a blacklist for insurance companies. Um, and
wow.
in many cases, when we go to inspect these subpanels, we're like, these are operating, they're fine, but the insurance company doesn't want to touch them because there's been some history of them not working. So there's a lot of that going on right now. We've had just this week alone, we've had three different buyers in contract for multifamily properties, um, and they all have Zinsco panels. And so immediately you have to replace the Zinsco panel, to get insurance. And then many of those, there's also knob and tube wiring. And so you have to rewire these multifamily buildings, and most of them are occupied with tenants in them. So you have to figure out the tenant relocations and what to
Oh,
plan
oh
do
no.
that because the job requires rewiring units.
Oh God.
So we're starting to work with a lot of buyers, try to like strategize how to do these effectively. But this is all being driven by the insurance issues in the state of California.
So how much of this do you think is the insurance companies just kind of coming up with any kind of excuse not to insure the property?
It's all about insurance. We're solving an insurance problem.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the city of San Francisco doesn't have an issue with knob and tube wiring.
Oh,
We ABC News ran a story a few weeks ago because they picked up that insurance companies are dropping policies, and they called us, to understand what a knob and tube replacement looks like. So we brought them to a job site and showed them it was a great story. As part of the story, they also called the fire department, and the fire department said, there is no trends of residential fires being caused by knob and tube.
oh wow.
And so, yeah, there could be risk, but there hasn't been a fire reported by the fire department that's related to knob and tube. So
So is this coming down from the commissioner basically, or is this coming from the insurance companies?
it's coming from the insurance companies.
Yeah, okay. So they have decided that these, particularly these four panels and knob and tube, are items they want to avoid. So they're basically forcing people to change out. So just out of curiosity on these multifamily units, what sort of ballpark range, I don't know how many units are involved, but what sort of range of cost are we talking about?
To rewire and put a new sub panel, you're talking probably 20, 25,000 a unit.
Whoa, wow.
That includes all the electrical work, patching, floating, painting,
Yeah.
rewire, new sub panels, permits, inspections. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, 25,000 per unit. So do they do some buyers build that in? Do they actually have to get it completed before they close escrow, or do some buyers take the properties and buy them with the knowing they're going to have to replace it to get insurance?
It's usually a collaboration with the insurance company. They want to see a commitment to doing this work, and they'll provide deadlines to complete the work by. Um, there's if you didn't want to do any of this work, there's always the California Fair Plan.
Oh, right.
It's not a great plan. It's expensive. It is the insurance carrier of last resort. Um, you still have to get additional policies for liability and flooding, and other issues, but they're really that the fair plan is there for properties that can't get insurance primarily due to the location in wildfire areas.
But just out of curiosity, uh, I'm not sure you can calculate this, but the even if you go with the fair plan and you add the other insurances, by the time you pay the premium, there's got to be a cost cycle involved that it's probably easier to go ahead and do a replacement and get lower insurance, I would think.
Um, yeah, you got to look at the time horizon of how, yeah, maybe over a long period of time it makes sense. Not everyone sees it that way. Some people are willing to pay the higher premium. Uh,
Yeah, and just go with that and not do the replacement. So, yeah, difficult situation. So, how many projects are you working on currently?
uh, got 5 right now
Yeah,
happening in San Francisco.
yeah, 5 in the mill right now. And so I know from my own house, the are you avoiding cutting into the walls at some points and just kind of fishing the wire through the existing channels, or does that work sometimes?
Yeah, we always try to fish through the garage. Many of the houses here still have open joist bays that we can fish through. Many of them have attics that we can go up and then over through the attic and come down and fish that way. The jobs get a little more challenging when, like, say, a 2-unit building over a garage, and then we have to get to the top floor. That might require, utilizing a conduit on the exterior of the building to
Oh,
wire up and then bring it down. We've done jobs where we've been able to feed. It's a vacant 2-unit building. We can run Romex up the walls through the sandwiched unit in the middle and bring it to the top floor.
yeah.
But yeah, we're always trying to find ways to make these jobs easier. Because when you're opening the walls, you're okay. You drill that 4-inch circle like we do, but then you're using like a right angle drill to get through the studs and the joists, and so it's a bit of art and science to it.
Oh, yeah. So 4 inches. Why do you need 4 inches? That sounds like it would demolish the stud to go through that big a hole.
Well, we're not going through the studs. If we find a stud, we'll just move and drill another hole to this left or right.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Um, but we do 4-inch circles because it allows our painter to pre-make the 4-inch patches.
oh,
Um,
I see.
and so we patch really quickly because we can make consistent 4-inch patches, and then add backing, um, add hot mud, float it, and then paint it. And we usually paint it wall corner to corner.
Well, I know from our experience, both the electrician and the painter have to basically be very experienced artists because this is more art than science, really, in some ways. I mean, these guys are experts at doing this, putting this together.
And most of the projects we work on are lath and plaster, so
Yeah.
it takes a little bit more experience working in that environment.
Yeah, no, that makes it even more fun and more difficult. So, So I'm curious, does that 25 grand also include a relocation cost?
No, no. What some owners will try to do is if there's a vacancy or multiple vacancies, they'll try to move tenants into those vacancies temporarily. And then for in San Francisco where you've got, all these rent control laws, how do you deal with that? Well, this is a safety issue, and you could easily, get a letter from the insurance company how this needs to get done, to, deal with the rent board or the negotiation, because it's obviously no tenant wants to leave their unit. But there are situations that, force them to.
So I suspect you've run into the classic sublease situation under rent control, and that probably makes it even more fun and interesting to deal with.
Yeah, these aspects of the job, we don't get into the weeds too much. We advise our clients, and then they have to go deal with the with the tenants. But there's ways to get this, you know, uh, done a little bit smoother as long as the process.
So it sounds like, yeah, you've done a fair amount of projects in San Francisco, but now you're kind of working all over the Bay Area. Uh, so I'm curious, you said you're doing some marketing on Instagram and some other places. I'm curious about your marketing efforts.
Yeah, no, video marketing, on Instagram and YouTube has been really helpful. We're always trying to show the jobs that we're working on and what's involved in them because most people don't realize that we're turning their homes into Swiss cheese. And like we try to be very clear from the get-go, like we're opening up the walls, like there's things that we can find in there. There could be dry rot in there. There's all these things that come up when you open up the walls. And so, like there could be some renovation work that was done previously that was done without permits. And right. And so we'll find hidden junction boxes in the walls. And then since it's our permit, it's our liability. So we have to fix anything that we find. And so we always make that, something that our clients are aware of from the beginning. Like we're not responsible for, non-code compliant work that now we have to fix, and we hate doing change orders, but if there's work that was there incorrectly and it's now our permit, it's additional scope that we have to take on.
So on average, how many holes do you cut per project, would you say?
Um, we did a single family home in El Cerrito, and there were 125 holes. Uh,
Oh, wow.
it was a 17 or 1800 square foot house. Um,
Wow.
um, but
25.
we're doing one right now. We're doing I think it's like a 1200 square foot condo in the marina. There was some renovation work done in the past, and that one's like maybe 25, 30 holes. But we're also able to come up through the garage in that one pretty easily. Um,
So I'm curious, that's an interesting circumstance in that if you're in a condo building, then basically the whole building is knob and tube, right? So you upgrade one unit, you,
mhm.
you basically probably have to inform all the other condo owners that, hey, you need this work also, right?
Yeah, in this situation, the condo had already been staged. They got their inspection report back after it was staged, learned that there was knob and tube in it, and we did our inspection, and they ended up realizing that it's really beneficial to the sale to complete this work. And so they moved out most of the staging. We put down floor protection and covered up all the remaining furniture and completed a knob and tube replacement. That was pretty quick. It was done in 2 weeks. We're actually finishing up the job right now. But the building is was wired with knob and tube wiring. Our client is only one of the units, so that unit is rewired. There will need to be, I suspect there could be, there's two insurance policies for multifamily buildings, one for the unit when there's condos and one for the whole building. So there is risk that the building might have to, you know, replace the knob and tube in the common areas. And then that unit as well, that is not our client at some point would likely need to be changed as well.
So what how far back to the panel do you have to go in that case? Do you go clear back to the building panel to put in new wiring, or how does that work?
In this case, so you have in this property, there is a 200 amp service disconnect. So there's 200 amps of power coming to the whole building. Then there's
Oh,
then there's two separate sub panels for each unit, um, and then a common area sub panel. And so where we were pretty much just rewiring from the sub panel throughout the unit.
yeah,
But yeah, we didn't touch the common area because that
yeah.
wasn't under our
Uh,
scope. But yeah, that building, yeah, they'll need to replace the knob and tube, or their insurance could be at risk.
yeah, right. So it just all of a sudden it becomes a domino effect, so to speak. So you can only
Yeah.
go back so far.
But we've done a bunch of these now already, and we're finding that these are expensive jobs, right? They could be, jobs could be the range has been 20,000 to, for like a 2 unit building up to like 85,000.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of variables that go into that range. But obviously a lot of it is due to, how fast we can execute this job. And that's why, the 4-inch circle system that we have to make painting and patching faster, like anything we can do to improve the system makes the work more cost effective. But we're now being asked to finance these jobs for sellers
oh wow.
because no one wants to like spend that much money to do the work
Right,
on
right.
market, or they may not have the money. So yeah, that's something that we started doing as well. And then we get paid out from the proceeds of the sale. Um, but we're also, looking at, we kind of created an investment vehicle now, and we're also looking to buy these properties that need knob and tube replacements, sub panel replacements, possibly service upgrades. Anything dealing with insurance is something that we're interested in buying and developing or flipping. But that's the real opportunity we see, especially in the state of California. Everything driven by insurance is a really good opportunity right now.
So I'm curious, I assume that your electrician and your painters are subcontractors, or are they actually employees of yours?
No, they're all technically subs, and we work with the same teams on every project. And so we created a standard operating process of how we execute these jobs. All of our subs are trained on that process, and
Yeah.
there's always very clear communication. We work as teams. Um, but yeah, because the process is, you get permits, we put down floor protection with our painter. Our electrician then does the rough in work, that then we pass rough-in inspection. Then we patch, float, and paint the walls. And then once that's done, we reinstall the fixtures, switches, and outlets. Then our painter comes back to do touch-up paint around everything to make sure it looks perfect. And then allocate about 3 to 4 hours of cleanup, and then, move off the job site and call for final inspection.
So I'm curious, are you using an architect to get permits? How are the permits done?
Most of the permits can be done over the counter.
Oh,
Um, but many times there needs to be a deeper connection with the city. For example, we're looking at a property right now that was built, say around, I don't know, 1900,
Oh, oh wow.
and it's in Pacific Heights. And we've looked at a few deals in Pacific Heights, and the service disconnect is run on fuses. And
Oh God.
and so in this case, it's in a non-code compliant location, which is like a sliding door in like a powder room in a basement. And so it doesn't have a typical 3 foot clearance. And we generally do not want to deal with service upgrades because then you have to deal with PG&E.
Right, right,
And it's just it's a black hole dealing with them. Whereas a normal knob and tube replacement is under our full control, no PG&E involvement. But when
right.
you get to the service upgrade or service changes, yeah, it requires PG&E. And so we don't want to like start a job, do the full knob and tube replacement in the house, put in a new sub panel, and then have the inspector say, "Oh, you can't use this service, service disconnect. You need." And so sometimes it's really, it takes a little bit of time sometimes to make sure we can execute and get final inspection. And so a lot of these deals are transaction related and there's deadlines. And so sometimes
Oh,
to give
yeah.
a firm quote when there could be exposure.
Right,
And
right,
we often get a lot of pushback because it's hard. People don't understand like the nuances of this business.
right, right.
Um, and so, but that is something that comes up, and we know about those fuse service disconnects because we received termination notices on properties in Pacific Heights from carriers that inspected the property, and they say, "Oh, we saw fuses. You need to replace those fuses in 30 days."
Oh,
And you can't replace anything in 30 days when you deal with PG&E.
no, no. Yeah, we're doing an upgrade on one of the buildings I'm working with, and it's been, what, a year, 2 years trying to get an upgrade from 200 amps to 600 amps. It's just a mess. So anyway, I can sympathize with that situation completely. Madhouse. Well, this has been incredibly fascinating. I think we could talk probably for another 2 or 3 or 5 days about this, but at this point, where can people get a hold of you, Matt? Because they're going to want to find you.
Yeah, well, we were the first mover, and so we were able to get knobandtubereplacement.com. We have our Instagram handle is Knob and Tube Replacement. Our YouTube channel is Knob and Tube Replacement. And my name is Matt at knobandtubereplacement.com.
All right. Well, it's great talking to you, and I look forward to an date here in another 6 to 12 months or whatever, because I think the whole world is changing right now. So great to talk to you.
That's a wrap on today's journey through the SF commercial real estate scene. Ready to share your story? Visit sfcommercialconversations.com/guest. Your insights could lead the next conversation.